Thank you, Colleen. Well, when Colleen asked me to come and talk about safety, I said, absolutely, I'd love to talk about the regulatory life cycle of technology in biomedical safety. It's a really hot topic. In fact, from a government standpoint, it's getting a lot of attention. And then I took a deep breath and thought, do I really want to do this? Because it's quite complex. And first of all, I want to say thank you, though, to Colleen, to Jean and Scott Gant for trusting me to come back. This is my third time back, and one of those times was virtual, so I'm really honored to do that. But back to this topic of biomedical safety, what does that really mean? It's quite complex. And so my wish today for you is that you will leave with a greater understanding of the biomedical safety in the complex regulatory environment that it sets in. So I thought long and hard, how would I present this? And I decided I wanted to present it in a story type of format. But why stories? Well, all the neurologists in the world will tell you that stories create a neuroscience path of brain coupling together between the storyteller and the receiver. And that coupling lights up the brain and will allow you to create better shared memories. And if you have better shared memories, you can retain facts and figures even when they're complex. And so we're going to do some storytelling today, and then also the brain science of storytelling is impactful in the chemistry standpoint because it creates more oxytocin in the brain, and oxytocin is the material that relies or helps us with human behavior and social interaction. That also includes recognition and retention, and then of course trust. But most importantly, storytelling can create empathy, and it triggers the deep limbic brain system in the core, and that's where you realize that people do what they do not because of what they're saying, but because they really believe it. So Simon Sinek is one of the guys that I've talked about when I've been here before. He wrote the book Start With Why, and he says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so that's what I've decided to do, but we've got to do a little business first. I need to do a conflict of interest disclosure. I am employed by Vanderbilt full-time, and I'm going to give them some shout out here in just a minute. You'll be able to understand why. I am a legal consultant with Birch, Porter, and Johnson. I am a speaker for Electromed, who we just heard from. I'm a big supporter of their technology. And anybody that wants to learn how to earn the adult critical care, especially from the NBRC, I'm on the job analysis committee and can sell you, no, I won't do that. No, I won't sell you a test. That's a joke. But we are meeting in December to finalize the 2025 ACCS exam. So I would take it this year if you possibly can. So, but when we go back to our objectives, I do want to explore the administrative regulatory foundations of medical safety in the practice of respiratory care and sleep medicine. I want to convey some case studies related to that, and then I want to define the safety as a foundation of patient care. So, but before we do that too, I want to say that I've got one other disclosure that I'm going to share with you after we learn about where I spend my days. Okay, there's no sound here, Jason. Is that okay? There's no sound with this video. Should I do something different? Just 1 second, guys. We can go back. Technology is wonderful when it works. Because I've got a couple other videos that I want to play. It's not that important. Okay. All right, let's try this again. So I want to thank my, no, it's not, I'm not hearing it. So That's okay. I can talk through it. So this is where I work every day, and I want you to notice throughout this video what you're seeing. You're seeing a lot of medical device. You're seeing a lot of high-end medical devices that are integrated with software for diagnosis. So in this short little video, there's over 20 different type of class 1, class 2, and class 3 of medical devices. And so medical device safety is all around us in our day-to-day practice. So I'm really proud to be able to share this with you and thank Vanderbilt for giving me the day off to come down and spend time with you guys. So it's going to end with great music, and it talks about Vanderbilt Health making healthcare personal. And so we're taking safety very, very seriously at Vanderbilt, all the way from the newest employee that works in one of the support teams, all the way up to all of the residents, fellows have to now take a safety class related to what we're going to talk about. But I mentioned earlier that I have one other disclosure that I need to make with you. So in this particular video, it represents a colleague that I had for over a decade. Her name was Mary Lou, and when I started working in biomedical safety, that's what we had, is a whole lot of stacks of papers, a whole lot of telephones, a whole lot of stuff. And when I worked with Mary Lou on regulatory projects or operational projects, she would occasionally say, "I've had a 3 and 6 day, have a good night." Well, as our relationship came to an end after about 10 years and I moved on and she went on to another career path, I finally asked her, "Mary Lou, what does a 3 and 6 day mean?" And she would say, "It's a day that I have to go home and have 3 glasses of wine and 6 cookies because I work with you." So what I'm committing to you, my disclosure, is that today I hope it's not a 3 and 6 day, being the last lecture of the day. But, so that's my disclosure. I'm not going to make you feel like you need to go have 3 glasses of wine and 6 cookies. But I do want to ask, what does safety mean to you? Anybody, just shout out. What does safety mean to you? I heard something, I'm sorry? Do no harm. That is absolutely right. Thank you so much. So when we think about from ourselves and the patient experience, we don't want to be hurt. You don't want to do any harm. You want to heal me with evidence-based medicines, and you want to treat me with kindness and respect. So that is the foundation of what we want to do with biomedical safety. What we have to do with them is to make sure that we talk to each other and that we understand and that we read what's coming out in the science and that we can question the authority with respect around us, because what really will happen is what happened to me as a young guy. So full disclosure, I told you I was going to tell some stories. You probably have heard this one before, but if you've heard it before, just laugh again and or roll your eyes. But I left the hospital in Murfreesboro, as Middle Tennessee Medical Center, and I left to go into the home care world. Why did I do that? Did I do it for honor? No, I did it because I wanted to make more money. I was just selling myself out to whatever I can do. And of course, I was assigned some safety regulations, reading. I was supposed to take a couple of courses, and my first day I walked into the home care office and the owner met me and said, "I'm so glad you're here. We've got a hospice patient to be set up on an oxygen concentrator. I've got all the things you need in the truck." I said, "Oh, okay, we got a truck." Okay. So went around to the truck. It had the oxygen concentrator there. It had an 8-cylinder that was strapped in long ways laying on the bed of the truck, and of course an E-cylinder that you see here. But in my mind, when I saw the truck, this is what I saw. I never had ever driven a truck before. I didn't know. And of course, my boss tossed me the keys to the truck and he said, "You ready to go?" And I said, "Absolutely." I told him, I was not going to let him know that I did not take the safety training. I did not do what I was supposed to do. I never had touched an H-cylinder from the back of a truck before. And so, but I knew exactly where I was going, but this is what I should have remembered. So I really need some audio on this. It was really impactful, but that's okay. This guy is talking about how important safety is with medical cylinders, and also H cylinders that weigh about 80 pounds. And so I drove along the truck successfully. It wasn't that far from the home care office. I knew exactly where I was going, and I was smart enough to think I'm going to back into the driveway. Because if I backed into the driveway, I could at least get the equipment out right. And so what I did is I took the concentrator in, introduced myself to the 80-year-old couple. He was a hospice cancer patient, end-stage lung cancer, and I got the concentrator hooked up, and I thought, okay, now I need to make sure that I get this backup H cylinder in. And so I went back out to the truck, and I didn't know how to really get it out, so I slid it halfway out, and I had on these great Bass Weegian loafers. I looked really good with the tie. I've looked good. But what happened was I pulled it out too far, and when I turned around to get the hand truck to put it down, I touched the tank, and it went on, whoop, right down on my foot. So this is what happened to me. So as you can see in this video, and the sound is really great, I'm sorry we don't have it played, but that's okay, he's screaming. So let's watch that again. So this is exactly what I look like and sound like in the driveway of my very first home care patient. And as I was screaming, the wife came out, heard me, and as she said, "Are you okay?" I saw the H cylinder rolling down the driveway towards the street. So I said, okay, I just need to take my shoe off. And when I took my shoe off, this is what my foot looked like. And so I was bleeding very badly. I was screaming. And all of a sudden, the next thing I knew, the wife put me in the passenger seat of the truck. She got in the truck, and I'm thinking, what about the patient? And I said, please don't call the company. I'll come back and I'll set him up. And she said, oh, I don't know, honey. Just hold on. I've never driven a truck. And off she goes. So I am in this truck, bleeding out, and I'm going back to the ER that I just had quit from. Wasn't a good look. So she pulls in like a bat out of, Hades into the ED, and they come out and they grab me, and I'm bleeding everywhere. And next thing I know, I'm on a gurney, and the first thing they do in the ED when you've got blood all over you is to strip you down. So I'm completely exposed, and the next thing I hear is the patient pulling the curtain, or the patient's wife pulling the curtain back and saying, honey, don't worry, I called the company. And so I was not only fully exposed to her, I was humiliated. However, I was given great grace by the company and great grace by that particular company or couple. And so I ended up learning a valuable lesson about the importance of really taking safety seriously. It was very humbling. So anyway, that's my story about how important it is to understand any kind of biomedical safety. But the virtuous elements of safety really start with what we call quality. And I'm going to talk a lot today about the quality system related to biomedical safety, but that's always paired with experience. So in your clinical practice, you really want to understand the quality system of the products you're using, the experience, and then what efficiencies that they bring. Such as what we just heard from the last speaker about the bronchiectasis. And then you've got to be engaged and ask those right kind of questions, and that's great safety. Now, in the hospital environment, the studies have said that safer, can everybody hear me okay? Safety practices have a 28% decrease in all sorts of central line blood infections, 70% in catheter infections, and 11% in pressure injury ulcers, especially for any of those who work in sleep. And you have to understand the material surrounding the CPAP mask and how that needs to fit correctly to prevent the decubitus ulcers on the face. We're seeing a rise in that. Most importantly, safety has been linked to 0.8 days less in the hospital, and it improves those patient experiences of where we were just talking about don't hurt me. So we have 33% likelihood that whoever you're working with is going to recommend you. 38% of nurse communication goes up, 30% of staff responsiveness, and 23% of doctor communications with you as a practitioner. So that's really important. But really, where does safety be established? We can start with state licensure. So in the corner of this slide, you can see there is the Respiratory Care Board and the rules related to that. In the set of rules that garnish the practice of respiratory care, the term patient safety is used over 5 particular times as a heading. So that tells you how important, because we all know about the NBRC, and it is geared towards the mission of making sure the people that have practiced in our profession, as well as the ASM for sleep, are qualified to do that and educated at the right level. I put CAP up here. CAP is the College of American Pathology that accreditates blood gas laboratories and general laboratories. And their quality index is very, very similar to good manufacturing practices that we're going to talk about. And then why CMS? Well, CMS is the government regulation that oversees the laboratories and who pays for what when. And then, of course, there's a Joint Commission seal there that is very important. So if you've ever worked on any kind of Joint Commission project, you know that safety runs through all of those standards. In fact, there's a whole chapter of life safety related to equipment and patient care. So in the corner, in the right corner there, you can see the term CDRH, which is Center for Device and Radiological Health, and that's who the FDA reports to. So let's really, though, pull back the curtain and look at when did the FDA start in our country and why. Well, if we do a timeline for 170 years, you can see that in 1948 there was a group of chemists that were founding the Department of Agriculture, and it was these chemists who actually determined that there was a lot of problems in food safety, and that was food and materials that were coming into our seaports. And so from 1948 to 1905, they really worked on that. It wasn't until the 1870s when interstate communication and the railways started happening that they really found it even worse. So what happened, these guys really pushed for about 20 years to get rid of adulteration in milk with water that also had arsenic in it, wine that had copper in it, those type of things. And what happened in the 1880s, there was a public groundswell for purity and cleanliness for health. And that led to the 1906 actual Food and Drug Administration Act. And what happened between 1906 and 1938 was things didn't get much better. It really wasn't until the real hard years of the Depression that they've decided, the federal government said, hey, we really need to put some teeth into this FDA Act. Until then, there really wasn't any laws, and so judges couldn't hold people accountable because there wasn't any law. But in June 28th of 1938, President Roosevelt signed that into law, and what that particular law did, it actually made standards for manufacturers to have scientific proof that their device or medicine was safe and it could be effective and it did what it said it was going to do. It also gave specific funding for federal inspections of the marketplace and the factories. And it established these guidelines for fairness and honesty and truth, transparency, which really turned into what we call today good manufacturing practices. And there's a C before the good manufacturing practices. It's called current. So look at the timeline, though. About 1947, you can see where our profession started with Dr. Levine there, who decided that oxygen, which was classified as a drug, could be a real good therapy in the hospital setting. And then as we moved on into the 50s and the 60s, there was a food coloring additive device and then a drug amendment as drugs became more sophisticated. And then 1976, it's when the medical device amendment, and that's where a definition, which we're going to go over in just a few minutes, of what is a medical device comes into play. But look how it tracks very closely. Then in 1960, the first RRT was earned, and in 1977, the inhalation therapy changed to the American Association of Respiratory Care. But 1969, the current good manufacturing practices were established into code. And so that's where this 21 CFR Part 110, and I can talk all day about the legal aspect of that, and I can cite you codes all day long, but you're not going to remember them. So I'm going to tell you some stories to help you remember that. And then in 1990, the Safe Medical Device Act passed again because of technology changes of where we are. And then if you look back in history, we really started aligning ourselves in 1990 to the AASM for our sleep profession. And so we're moved past the founding of government standards for health and safety by about 170 years to where we are today. So today, it really is the Center for Disease and Radiological Health to protect and promote public health. And there's a little video clip here, and we're not going to play it because we don't have sound, but it really is very broad and supportive of everything from a toothbrush to a microwave to make sure it's safe for us, and especially those things that we use in the practice of respiratory care. So what is a medical device? Well, this is what the 1976 amendment said. So a medical device is an instrument, apparatus, machine, implant, or vitro reagent that diagnoses, cures, treats, or prevents a disease or condition, and it does this by affecting the structure or function of the body, but does not achieve its purpose through a chemical, metabolism, or a drug. So, what we have is high-flow nasal cannula. Is this a device? It's a medical device? It is, because it helps in CPAP mask. Yes, it does. So we're going to talk about that, and we'll talk about some of the labeling related to that. But when we talk about our main primary purpose today is what is that total life cycle of a medical device? Well, the medical device can be founded all the way back from its initial testing through to when it's taken off the market. And the market approvals are called pre-market approvals for PMA. There's a couple of different ones here that I'm going to list for you, and we can talk about it, but the main one is a pre-market notification of a 510K. And we're going to spend some time talking about what the 510K means. And then today, as practitioners in the medical field, I encourage you to understand the adverse event through the manufacturer and user facility device, or MAUD website, and I've got some pictures to show you of that. So we're going to go back and talk about the current good manufacturing practice. This is defined in 21 CFR Part 820. So once again, story about this. As I moved along after my foot healed in the home care world, and we got large enough to where we decided we would register with the FDA, and we were transfilling oxygen cylinders from H cylinders that were teed together into E cylinders, and then we also bought a huge liquid tank. We had liquid oxygen and all that, and because we registered with the FDA, they came out and did a site inspection. So I was very proud, and I decided that I was going to let the FDA inspector talk with Preston Hunt. Preston was a gentleman about 70 years old. He was actually the best worker that I had in the warehouse. He knew the transfilling system and the regulations like the back of his hand. So I said, we're going to go through this without any problem. So the FDA inspector came. He said, tell me about your good manufacturing practices. But first, he said to Mr. Hunt, he said, I want to know how many people work in here. And Preston did, I bet, about half of them. So he said, really? He said, yeah, and Preston just went on and talked about his colleagues, talked about how lazy they were and how they didn't follow the rules, and I'm sweating. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm sweating. So once again, understanding the rules and regulation has to go all the way down to the newest level. So with the FDA, these good manufacturing practices were started in 1976, and they've become more and more vital today. And these practices are designed to prevent errors and contamination during all stages of the manufacturing process. So let's take a look at how a quality system components for CGMPs is built. It looks quite simple here, doesn't it? Well, the design controls there if I'm looking at the screen in your left corner, those design controls can include everything from the back of a napkin when somebody has designed something that's in their head, all the way to very technical CAD files. It also has to have approvals. It has to have testing and engineering. It's very, very important, your design controls. Now, we went through in 2021, 22, and 23, we went through very difficult CPAP recalls. Did anybody get affected by the CPAP recalls? Yes, absolutely. Well, guess what it was caused from? It was caused from an initial design flaw of the soundproofing material started to disintegrate over time, and especially was never tested with these air purifiers that got sold on a national level, and TV you can buy. If you're on CPAP, buy this hose cleaner, and that's what really happened, and that's where they had to go all the way back to the design controls to try to understand why that happened and how it was going to be replaced. Now, if you move over to the production and process controls, that's where there's step-by-step guidelines on how the manufacturers are going to make and where they're going to get the raw materials from. And then the equipment facility controls can be everything from safety and security, locking down your raw materials, and also then those records, document, and change controls of anything that happens. So when I hold up this inline Ballard suction device, there's got to be in any control system the design of this product, how it's processed and controlled, how it's sterilized, and how it's shipped out and how it's labeled. There's also up in those particular products, process controls, something called human factor designs, which is really important. So before something goes into the market, the FDA is really looking heavily at the human factor designs related to that. So what are the material controls? What if you're getting parts from China, parts from South America, you're using other type of raw materials to piece something together? That's where you have to make sure that those suppliers also meet those kind of standards. And then the big black bar there, management oversight, this is where you can really get into trouble as a manufacturer. I had the honor of being the senior leader for the country's largest independent diagnostic testing facility for cardiac monitoring. But we were not only a cardiac monitoring, we did not sell our device, but we were registered with the FDA as a spec developer and medical device manufacturer. So we had two swim lanes, two important things that we had to make sure our quality system was really tight. And that's because it was not a life-sustaining device, but it was a class 3 device that could detect life-threatening events. And so I was in my office one day, and I got a knock and said, FDA's here. I said, oh, really? Okay, I'll take them to the conference room, and I walked in, and there was our FDA inspector in a uniform, and she placed her badge, boom, and her gun, boom, on the table. And she said, we've gotten some complaints, and long involved story relating to a sub-supplier that we had used for plastic housing had failed an inspection, so that run through of life caught us. But it was crossing every T and crossing every I, but the way that the FDA works is similar to the Joint Commission, as where they're doing traceability studies and making sure that everything is safe. And it was a very stressful time, but we got to the root problem, and what we did is we were able to do a corrective and preventative action plan. And what the FDA will do for any manufacturers is write out what's called a 483 report. So a 483 report is public record, and basically that's a speed, and think about it like I got a speeding ticket and I was driving reckless and I had a DUI and it's all that and I got a court, that's my 483. But it will list the defects that the FDA uncovers when it does one of the site visits for medical devices. And of course, the manufacturer can correct things just like they do in the hospital setting on site to show that it's corrected. And then they can write a formal review in about 30 days. So the GMPs are very, very important. But let's go back and talk about how the FDA classifies devices. So Class 1 device, as you see on the screen here, are devices that are subject to a comprehensive set of regulatory authorities called general controls. And I'm going to explain that to you in just a little bit, that are applicable to all classes of devices. So general controls talk about adulteration. Now, remember I used that term in 1848 where the chemists were saying we were adulterating milk with water and poison. Adulteration is where you've got to make sure what you're producing is clean and pure and what you say. So these level 1 devices are all FDA regulated, but at the lowest level. So you can see a stethoscope, a wheelchair, a bandage, ABG syringe there. What we use, those are all level 1 controlled devices that have to be registered because they're intended to use in the medical world. Now, if we move on to what is a level 2 device, a level 2 device have those general controls that we're going to talk about in a minute, and they by themselves are insufficient to reasonably assure that safe and effectiveness of the device are going to occur. So if you take a look once again on the screen there on the left-hand corner, that is the Novasum device that was one of the first home sleep studies. And I was on the design team for that particular device, and it was quite confusing because it was a level 2 device, but it had 3 controls on it, and it was very confusing to get that approved by the FDA. They kept going back and forth. Is the level 3, is the level 2 device? But then all the subcomponents of that, or those accessories, are also registered with the FDA. And then if you move over there, you can see contact lenses, and now we're getting into diagnostic. Think about what an EKG machine that has software built into it, and it's going to look at the EKG and it's going to print out what's going on. And then why is an electric wheelchair versus a manual chair a level 2 device? Because of the potential harm related to the patient use or the caregiver use related to that. So once again, if you meet a level 2 device, you've got to do more in your design, more in your controls to make sure that it's safe and effective. Now, when we move on to a level 3 device, you can see here they are pacemakers, implantable hips, and of course the ventilators and the things that we use in our clinical practice. So a level 3 device is based upon that it really can be harmful and cause death to a patient. So this picture is not very good, but that is a servo U ventilator. I'm going to tell you a story about the servo U ventilators. Worked really hard to try to get the servo U fleet into Vanderbilt. They cost about $40,000 each, and so we finally were able to buy 6 of them, and I was so excited because the servo U ventilator, you can lift the screen up and you can put a connection, VGM connection, think of VGM connection, and you can hook it to a big screen like we're doing now, and I could teach modes of ventilation at the nursing school. I'll do a 4-hour block of class there every fall, and now I'll have the ventilator hooked to a test lung. I was so excited, and I had gone through the training with a rep on the servo U ventilator, and the day that I was rolling it over to the nursing school to use it for the first time, and it was going to be so exciting, I forgot to read really the importance of turning it on and off, and the FDA had added a particular point that this, from a safety feature, so it doesn't get to turn off, you have to take the on and off toggle that's just behind the machine. You have to pull it down and turn it over. That's so nobody can just hit it and it won't come off. Well, I had forgotten that because I wasn't paying attention in the class. I just wanted to get the ventilator into use. Well, I get over to the nursing school and I can't get the dadgum thing on, and I reached down, I kept trying to turn it on, and I finally broke it and I sliced my hand. So the very first $40,000 ventilator at Vanderbilt, I broke. So now the term is, if you're ever walking around Vanderbilt and you hear, "Don't do a Roger to it," that's because of me. So once again, I'm not dropping anything on my foot at my age, but that just goes to show you the importance of understanding the equipment you work with and what controls that they're in with that. So anyway, we have class 1, class 2, and class 3 devices. But how many are really out there in the market? Well, right now there's about 191,000 devices out on the market that the FDA oversees. But if you look at the classification of them, about 35% of them are all in that low risk. The moderate risk are 53, and about 9% of them are in the highest level. So if you are concerned about what type of device you use and what level it is, you can always look it up, and once again, there's a regulation number there that you will probably never be able to cite. I can cite it only because I went to law school to do that, but these type of device types will always be able to be looked up in the website, and that's a particular easy way to look that up. The product codes are designed with some logic behind them, and you can understand them once you look. But if you look at something you're using, it will have the label, it will have the product, it will have everything that you can look at it. And so if you go to the FDA's website, you can see the regulation that it falls in. And remember, I talked about the general controls. Well, here's where they are. It's adulteration or alterated, and it talks about misbranding, labeling, medical device reporting, establishing registration, device listing, and the 510K pre-market notification. And there in the bottom, good manufacturing practices of the system. So those are your general controls, regardless if you're using a device that will save a life or it's just used in general care. So I want to talk a moment about what a 510K summary is. So a 510K review is a comparative or substantially equivalent. So when you get called on by a manufacturer, or you're working in the clinical field and a new device comes out, more than likely it's going to be 510K approved, and that 510K document, if you went and read it, it's going to say substantially equivalent. So remember the oxygen concentrator I showed you in the back of the truck? Well, that was a Puritan bin oxygen concentrator, one of the first on the market, and everybody else that came out was substantially equivalent to that, and they would rely on that. So if you have something that gets submitted to the FDA, a 510K usually means that it's substantially equivalent to other devices from a safety standpoint on the market. So it really is a pre-market notification. Once you get a 510K letter, and what it does, it links to this 21 CFR Part Sub E code, and it is a market clearance application, and it is cleared. It is not approved. So if anybody tells you I'm using an FDA approved device, that's the wrong terminology. It is FDA cleared, and the documentation to determine those substantial equivalents can be found all on those websites. So if you ever have something you're using and you think that it's not safe, you can go and research it, but we're going to talk about how to report that. But now, as we are in 2024, it's really important that this is as of January, so just about 8 months ago, the FDA issued a new quality regulation standards, and they're linking it to the international or ISO standards. And take a look at the bottom here. It's saying January 2nd, 2026, 2 years after the publication is when these are going to go into effect. And that allows the general public to be educated and to make comments on it, and also the industry to make comments on it. So part of this is what we're going to talk about in just a few minutes on the future here. So once again, if you are concerned about a product that you can search by the appropriate product classification, you can search through a similar device, or you can search by device listing. All of the FDA has done a really great job of opening up their website to be user-friendly, and for time's sake we won't go. I have some links here, but since we don't have sound and I'm the last lecture of the day, I'm sure you guys want to go, and I promise you not to have to go get wine and cookies. So anyway, search for a similar device. So I just want to share this particular screenshot with you. This is the 510K pre-moga device, and you can see you have several open fields that you can type in if you're looking for something to see if it's safe or not. And also on the right side of the thing, you can see there the mod. There's a link to the mod, and we're going to talk about that. But the foundation of this talk was talking about the total product life cycle of a device. So if you're concerned about something, you can go to the total product life cycle, and they've opened it up to where you can just type in there, and I typed in nasal cannula and took a screenshot of that. But then it will pull up all the nasal cannulas that the FDA has listed, and it will give you the product code, and you can find all their history about them. So once again, total product life cycle is from when the time the device was initially 510K cleared to any type of injury reports, any type of manufacturer reports. This is where you can look up those 483 reports that I was talking about. And the MOD report is a medical device adverse reaction here. And so this is where Fisher-Paykel had a problem, and it's related to this, and it can give you all of that exposure. So what if you're working with a device and it fails? You can do a medical device reporting, and it gives you step-by-step on how you can report it. So what would be an important thing if you're using, say, a nasal cannula that keeps coming, the prongs keep breaking off, or the tubing is separated? That's going to be something really simple. It may be a lot number, it may be a batch problem with a manufacturer. So you always want to save and figure out, when you look at these devices, what lot number, and all the material on the side of this goes through that quality system. So if you end up, and also that's related to how the CPAP units that kept failing, they triggered an overview of the serial numbers and when they were manufactured. But I would encourage you to understand how to do this, because in our state licensure, it is our responsibility. Now, your responsibility could be reporting that back from a safety standpoint to your superiors, but you've got to have all the facts and the details right. So once again, the FDA is taking this very seriously. There's 18,000 sites across the country related to the FDA to prevent safety, or to prevent harm for safety. And just this year, they have published a medical device safety action plan, and guidance related to safer technology programs. And why do we think we're doing that today? Is it because we're still back in the 1800s using brass gears on things? It's not. It's because the future is coming related to this, and it's all related to the AI that it's generated. And so you remember the timeline that I showed you. It was interesting. In the 1950s and 60s, when our industry was being developed, well, I'll read you something from the history of electronics and computer science that was just recently published on AI. So the term artificial intelligence was first introduced by John McCarthy in 1956. So during a conference for a summer research project, so he characterized AI as the ability of a computer program to perform a wide array of tasks typically requiring human intelligence. So since 1956, we've been talking about this and how that particularly is affecting us. And today, in the future, the FDA and our medical device industry is struggling with how do we take AI which is now mimicking the neurostructures of the human brain. Remember, I was talking about the human coupling and the neural coupling that I was hoping we could have here today as my goal. Well, that's happening in AI, and it's happening as these algorithms are keying in bunches of new materials every minute and data every material, and they're adapting. So what the FDA is doing, in fact, next week or 2 weeks when we're in Orlando for our national conference, the AARC, the FDA is having a full questionnaire discussion that's open to the public related to artificial intelligence, and how are we going to be able to look at that with a new wave of medical devices that are coming. So the questions that they're going to be hope to be answered by the public and by those experts is what information should be included in those 510Ks when the device is enabled by generated AI. You know, when humans are not intended to be in the loop and the device enables with AI to make recommendations. Can you think about something on that? What about ventilator alarms? What about ventilators that now have AI capability? Hamilton has not, they have a great new ventilator mode that it will study the respiratory, the patterns and the peak flows and the PEEP and all the other things that's going on with patients, and then it will adjust with the patient. It's truly an AI type of algorithm in a ventilator. But what new and unique risks related to usability may be introduced in generating AI? And what, if any, specific information related to healthcare professions, patients' cares, should they consider? Should the government consider? So this is going to be very interesting to watch. So as we review and we wrap up for today, I want to just leave you with that the quality and the experience, don't drop a tank on your foot, the efficiencies and equipment engagement, got to be engaged, will equal the safety. So with that, I want to thank you very much and take any questions. Anybody concerned about anything? My foot's great. It's good.
Is that resolved with the devices and the
It's a great question. Yes. Yes. It has been resolved, but I was...
Sorry. Could you repeat the question, Roger?
Yes. The question is from a CPAP standpoint of this particular Respironics device and the air purifier, has that been resolved? And I think yes, one, they've stopped manufacturing those particular devices, and they've taken the foam out. And let me grab that. The blame fell with the manufacturer, with Respironics. Yes, and so there is a registry that closes next month, actually. If you have a device, you can register it and get it repaired or replaced. Yeah, but yes, that's a great question, though. So the question was related to that. But I am concerned that we're going to see things with AI in some of our devices that do not have human intervention, and I don't know where it's going to go, but I think we have a great foundation in our regulatory environment to at least that they're thinking about that. Any other questions? Any other things?